Hi, my name is William Griffing. People call me Griff. That's the way most people have come to know me as I've interacted with them on the internet. And it's funny, there's so many people out there that only know me as Griff. So you can certainly continue to refer to me that way, and I'll respond to all your questions. Let me tell you today a little bit about Spared and Shared. It was something that I created 15 years ago when I retired. I always had a passion for history, and because I worked in the scientific field, I didn't really have much of an opportunity to do history. But when I retired, I started investigating my family history and discovered that I'd had at least one in my direct line of ancestry who fought during the Civil War, and that's the gentleman whose picture is on the screen in front of you there today. His name was Jess Brewer, and he fought in the 9th Kansas Cavalry. I discovered, though, in investigating him, that he hadn't really written any letters during the war. So I was disappointed about that, but I also discovered that I had another great-great-grandfather who was in Kansas at the time of the Civil War, and he and his wife turns out had exchanged something like 500 letters between the two of them between the 1840s and the 1880s. Some of this correspondence had been deposited in libraries, and I was able to recover most of that. And since it had never really been transcribed in detail, I spent quite a bit of time transcribing those letters, and as a result, became fairly proficient at identifying or interpreting the words and the vernacular that was common in the mid-19th century. And so I kind of launched out into a career of transcribing letters after I finished my family letters. And I created Spared and Shared as a mechanism for capturing these letters and posting them on the internet. So I said, I've always had a passion for family history that started with our family letters, but because of this skill I developed in transcribing 19th century letters, um, it seemed to me like a natural, logical thing for me to do to continue to do this after I retired. I enjoyed it immensely, and I wanted something meaningful to do with the rest of my life. And so one of the things I noticed was that there were a lot of what I consider to be a lot of important history being sold on eBay. In some cases, whoever was selling it, in fact, didn't seem to understand its significance, or maybe didn't know the full content, and so they were selling material that they had no idea of its value. I felt that this history was being potentially lost, either because it was not being transcribed and shared, but maybe the people who owned it didn't realize the value of what they had. And so there was one dealer in particular that I noticed who was buying and selling on eBay, who always seemed to have some really good stuff. And I reached out to him just on a lark one day, proposed to him that if he would allow me to transcribe the letters that he anticipated selling on eBay, by sending scans of the letters to me and then allowing me to transcribe the letter and do research at the same time on what the letter was about, what's the content about, what's the significance, the historical significance of the material. I would provide him in return a transcript and this research that he could use when he posted the letters for sale on eBay. I was convinced that if he placed that material on eBay with that kind of background material, it would enhance his sales. He would actually do better in attracting people to his postings and have more competition for a letter and raise his revenue. I had to felt like I had to propose something to him that would be meaningful in that way in order for him to go to the lengths that I was asking him to scan the letters, email them to me, give me a little bit of time to do the research and the transcriptions and send them back to them. It was inserting myself into his process of buying and selling letters on eBay, which I anticipated would slow him down, and therefore he needed some kind of incentive for me to do this. It turned out that he accepted my proposal and that he started sending me these letters and diaries, and I worked furiously to try to keep up with his pace of selling. And because I had invested this much effort into the transcriptions and the research, I felt that I needed a place to put this material out on the internet where people could benefit from it. That was one of the conditions that of our arrangement, was that I wouldn't charge him for doing these transcriptions or the research, so long as he would allow me to post the transcription and the research that I had done on the internet so that others could gain access to this history, whether they were family members looking for ancestors' information, or whether or not it was historians who were writing books, who were looking for fresh new material to include in their books. I just felt this history needed to be shared. And so I found that WordPress as a website seemed to offer the best platform for me to archive this material on the internet. This was quite a number of years ago, it was 15 years ago, and so there was not the plethora of web space available in those days. There was fairly limited free bandwidth. I mean, you could pay more money to get a website, but I didn't want to necessarily invest a lot of money in this at this point in time. In fact, I had no idea that this project would grow to the lengths that it has when I started it. So I started out with spared and shared one, which allowed me, I think, maybe a gigabyte of information, something like that, that I could post these letters on. And then when that began to fill up, I launched spared and shared 2, and then spared and shared 3, and eventually I got up to like spared and shared 23. It's only been in the last couple of years, however, that you're able to buy for a reasonably small amount of money a huge amount of gigabyte space for storing information on the internet. And so the last couple of spared and shared websites that I created, I'm actually paying for those, but I don't have to pay very much money, and it allows, by paying for it, you're able to exclude the advertising that is often placed on websites. So many of my earlier spared and shared websites have a fairly annoying commercial that comes up in the middle of the letter or something as you're reading it, which I'm not too happy about, but I don't want to go back and pay for all of those websites. The information is still there on the internet, still searchable, and you can find it, but the websites are not as attractive, I don't believe, as my later websites, because I'm able to exclude that kind of advertising. I should say that in the early years when I was doing this, because I not only enjoyed the Civil War era, I enjoyed transcribing letters from the antebellum period as well. And so a lot of the early letters that I transcribed include letters that go back to maybe the 1820s and 30s as well. And this was an age when there was tremendous advances in transportation that I find particularly interesting. What I call travel letters. There are people who are experiencing travel either on canal boats or steamboats or early railroads, and I found that a fascinating period of time in American history. And so I did post quite a few letters from that period of time, but over time, I developed such a knowledge of Civil War history that I've pretty much evolved into that entirely now. It's just I only have so much time available to me, and because that's a period of time that I know the most about, I feel I can contribute the most to history by focusing on those Civil War letters. And so in recent years, that's where most of my time has been spent. I will also say that up until about 6 or 7 years ago, the awareness of this material that I had placed on the internet was fairly limited. People would contact me and tell me essentially that they stumbled upon these letters while researching their ancestors or something. That's often how people found them, just by doing Google searches. And I realized that for me to maximize the awareness of this material that's on the internet, that I needed to do more to try to advertise its availability. And so I launched, even though I've been doing transcriptions for 15 years since I've been retired, I launched this Spared and Shared Facebook site. It's actually 7 years ago. It was 7 years ago, I think 2 days ago. That was the 7-year anniversary. And so with Spared and Shared Facebook, what I do is announce the posting of a letter that I've done on my website. So I use it as kind of an advertising feature, just because there's so many people that enjoy reading the letters that I transcribe and research, to make them aware that something new is available on my website. I post a notice of it on Spared and Shared Facebook, and so the following on Spared and Shared Facebook has grown to something like 13,000 followers now. So there's a lot of people who are currently following me there. The first major publicity that I received, I would say nationally, came from a guy named John Banks, who some of you may know. He's a published author. Was a regular contributor in Civil War Times magazine. He had a column called Rambling, and I say was a contributor. And as some of you probably know, Civil War Times magazine recently went out of business after, I don't know, 60 years or something, some huge amount of time. And it was quite shocking when it did. I had come to know the editor there, and they've actually were including regular features of some of my transcriptions in that magazine in the last year or two that before they went out of business. But John wrote me a great column on me called "Copy that was published back in 2019. It was all about my passion for transcribing these letters and saving the history, and because that's a publication that was fairly wide read, that garnered some publicity for me. I also was featured on a radio talk show at Fredericksburg, where John Hennessy, who worked for the National Park Service at Fredericksburg, was being interviewed on a public radio, and he talked about my transcriptions. I've got actually on the next slide, I have a little piece where I'll play a little bit of what his interview entailed. I also want to mention, though, that Will Eichler, who works who has a Civil War Digital Digest and the History Fix audiovisual feature, he's included my material in some of the work that he does, and so I've gotten some publicity there, and then Jerry Prokopowicz at East Carolina University, who has the Civil War Talk Radio that's been around for a little over 20 years now, I believe. He does monthly radio talks with published authors, or in my case, I hadn't published any book at the time, but he had heard about my work on Spared and Shared, and so he featured me on his monthly program one time. So those are opportunities where I've been featured, where it allowed me to interact with a much wider audience and get more people to feature some of the work that I've done, so that others can learn about it and come to the site and gain more information. Now, as I mentioned, John Hennessy, who's was the National Park Service. That's a picture of him on the screen there, giving a talk somewhere near Fredericksburg. He recently retired in the last couple of years, and he was on this radio talk program where he talked about discovering Spared and Shared, and I'd like to play a little bit from him, if I could, here, so that you can hear what he had to say about my site.
Remarkable sites that I've seen on Facebook or on the internet. He has a Facebook page as well. It's not a Facebook site. Is a site called Spared and Shared. A guy named Griff. That's all I know. He's not from this part of the world. What he does, or what he's been doing for quite a long time, is to contact the owners or the dealers, oftentimes, who are selling letters and diaries online, or people contact him too, I think, and offering stuff, and he transcribes them and posts them. But what he does is he also puts in a tremendous effort to find out as much as he can about people who are writing these letters, and he puts them online, and it's an astonishing sight because of the volume. The man clearly wakes up in the morning, starts transcribing, and transcribes until he falls asleep at his keyboard at night. Because every day, literally every day, he's posting stuff that he has transcribed online. And it's all beautiful. I mean, he pays attention to design. He uses graphics beautifully. It is a pleasure to use his site. It's called Spared and Shared. He has a Facebook page called Spared and Shared. But more than that, it is for someone like me, or really anyone who just wants to take a dive into primary source material. Boy, this is just a treasure trove of stuff. Hundreds, thousands of letters he has transcribed over the years. And some of them are just individual letters from individual soldiers or civilians. Others are whole groups, wartime runs of letters, a whole collection from the soldier or between the members of a family. And that's really kind of one of the things that makes this particularly valuable is wherever he can, he gets both the outgoing letter home from the soldier, which are typically preserved, but a surprising amount of time, he also has the incoming letters from home, from the wife or the mother or the family at home, and he writes about them. Yesterday on his Facebook page, he put up a letter from a soldier relating his encounter with a local woman. And the soldier wrote, "The old lady of the house had a queer idea of the war. She claimed that if someone of the rebel army would kill Jeff Davis and someone of the Yankee army would kill Lincoln, why then she thought there would be nobody to set them in fighting each other." And that's a sentiment you often hear, that really, you hear it in almost every war. If you left it up to the soldiers, peace would be at hand. They would figure it out. No one's actually ever tried that in the history of the world so far as we know, except maybe for the Christmas truce in World War I in 1914. But so these letters are just a treasure trove. I think people get intimidated by source material sometimes because, hey, there's so much of it. But he has a tremendous eye, and he's done us all a great favor by really applying this idea that for something to be easy to consume, it also has to be nice to look at and well organized. And so he pays a lot of attention to that. And so not only are there the letters here, but there's the story of the people here. And it really is a unique site in our business, one that is growing, and it is saving. And what I like about it as a historian is when these letter collections go on sale on eBay or wherever they go on sale, oftentimes when they're purchased, they disappear.
Right.
They're no
You
longer
never see
available, no longer available to researchers or scholars. So he is saving them for scholarly use. It'll be interesting to see how we manage a site like his going forward, because we don't know how long digital data is going to last. We know paper will last for centuries. But we don't know how long digital data will last. So, so we worked out an agreement with him, or talked with him. I talked to him about our exchange emails, and I said, do you mind if we save the stuff that's relevant to our area to the files at the park? And we are doing that. But that by itself is a big job, because there's dozens and dozens of letters that he's come up with, and really some new stuff, some feeling stuff.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Just the other day, he posted a letter written by a soldier who was part of the expedition that was sent out from Washington about a month after the Battle of the Wilderness to gather up the remaining wounded. We're still on the field 30 days after the battle. And the soldier describes not only that experience of gathering up these wounded, but the battlefields themselves. And so, there's something that comes up on his page almost every day. And his Facebook page doesn't post everything that he does, but it gives you a good sense of it. So if you're on Facebook, search for Spared and Shared. If you're not on Facebook, just Google Spared and Shared Civil War Letters, and you'll go right to the site, and just have a little fun exploring. It's really remarkable.
That was a good summary, I think, of how this work is being viewed by people who work at National Park Services, where, history sites. They are frequent followers of the work that I do. And in case of Fredericksburg and the Chancellorsville battlefields, they were downloading not only the transcriptions, but the scans of the images that I had posted online with the letters. I always attempt to put the scans of the letters on the website along with the transcriptions, so that people can actually see the original handwriting of the soldier or the civilian, whoever wrote the letter, and see for themselves whether or not, first of all, whether or not I've transcribed it correctly. But in the event that they might want to use it to write a book or something, it's very important for them to independently verify that the way that I've transcribed the letter is correct. And so I go out of my way to make sure that that is a very visible and legible feature of my postings. One of the things that I realized I needed to do, rather than just let people stumble upon these letters, was to create a website where I could list all of the Civil War letters. And it doesn't list all the letters I've transcribed over the last 15 years, because many of them are not Civil War, but it does list all of these Civil War letters that I've done. And I posted this website. Actually, the little QR code that's up there on the screen will actually take you to this Billy Yank and Johnny Reb letters site that I created to archive all of these letters, to put them in there in order of, I've listed them by state, by company, by regiment. And then there's an active link. As you can see, there's the name of the soldier, and there's an active link. If you click on that, that actually takes you to the website in which this letter is posted. As I said, those letters may occur on as many as 20 or more different websites that I've worked on. So it's they don't all take you to the same website. But as you can see, as an example here, I've got some of the Iowa letters showing up on the screen here. And while it has the name of the soldier, you can see also there that in some cases there's that's maybe just one letter. In some cases it's 5 letters. In some cases it's like 4 letters in a diary or something like that. Here's one down here with 18 letters. There's this list goes on and on by all the different states. When you go in there and scroll through, you can see how many Civil War letters that I've actually transcribed. I should also mention that in addition to posting Civil War letters on these spared and shared websites that I have, I've created somewhere actually closer to 160 different websites, I believe, in the last 15 years, where I've showcased an entire collection of letters on its own website. As you'll notice in the headings of some of these, on all of these, that spared and shared does not appear in the header. So one might stumble upon one of these websites on the internet and not even realize that I was the author of it, or that spared and shared was the is connected to it in any way, shape, or form. But in some instances, like the website in the upper right, there's Crossing Hell on a Wooden Bridge. This was a collection of letters of the 4th Michigan that some collector had gathered for decades, and he came to me asking me to help him put together a website where his letters could be showcased on there. And so I helped him put that together. And I've done that for, I don't know, half a dozen different individuals over the last 15 years to, in most cases, showcase their own family letters that they wanted to have on a website. Because there's so much history out there, and because it's that I've posted, and because it's mostly in private hands, people have questioned whether or not is there a way to make sure that this material is going to be preserved. What, for example, would happen if WordPress went away, if it, as a business, it failed and the data all went went away? It's certainly possible. I don't have. I transcribe my letters directly into the WordPress site. I don't save hard copies of this material. I have way too much of it to have ever done that. So it's all on the internet out there, and many people have felt that there needs to be a permanent repository for all of this material. And so one individual, a friend of mine, Jeff McCardo, who works at the University of Illinois, reached out to me one time and asked whether or not I would be willing to work with Shenandoah University, who expressed an interest in downloading all of this material into their archives. And so worked with Jonathan Noyolis at the McCormick Civil War Institute at Shenandoah University, and reached an agreement where he was going to have graduate students work on that as a project to migrate all the material that's currently stored on spared and shared, at least the Civil War material, into their archives, downloading transcriptions and scans of their letters into their servers so that there's at least a backup of this material at a major university. So they're slowly working on that project. I suspect it'll take many years, but that's a project that I think is well worthwhile, and it will expose. It's great that young students are being given an opportunity to access this material and to work on a project of preserving history. I should also mention that there's another site called Research Arsenal that has just come out in the last couple years. I think they've been online now for about 2 years. And but they've worked for developing this site for at least 5 or 6 years ago. I think it was at least 5 years ago when they approached me with the idea that they were going to create this service, and they wanted to include letters and diaries, and wanted to know if I had any objection to them downloading the material that I had posted on Spared and Shared into their archive. So yet another server where this material could be stored. And I had no objection to that. I thought they were a little crazy when they came to me because I don't think that I felt that they didn't know how much material that we were talking about. But lo and behold, they contacted me a couple of years ago and said, we're ready to go online, and we think this works pretty good, and what do you think? And so they asked my opinion. I checked out the site, and it seems to work quite well. They actually have, as you can see there on the screen, that's right off their website. You can see the various kinds of material that you can gain access to, which is not available in most other Civil War databases. They have ordnance returns, quartermaster and ordnance reports, special orders, morning reports, muster rolls, clothing and ledger books. We've got all this material online that even pictures from the National Archives that you can search. And it's all, what's really nice is that it's all word searchable. So you can search all of the letters Civil War letters that I've done by keyword there, where because I posted all of my letters on Spared and Shared on multiple websites, um, there's no, other than through Research Arsenal, there's no way to search all of those websites by keyword except to use Google. And with Google, you get a lot when you search a whole bunch of stuff. So it's nice that it's only searching. You can have it just search the letters and diaries that they've put on into their web server by keyword and come up with letters that pertain to a particular subject or mention a particular word, something like that. They have all of the letters and diaries that I've transcribed up through Spared and Shared 21, I believe, on there. So they don't have all of the letters that I've done on the last two websites that I've been working on, but they eventually plan to put them all on there as well. They offer this service for a very nominal fee. I think it's only about $80 a year. So it's a very affordable thing. They also offer it by the month if you just wanted to get into it for a couple of months and use it. It's a very reasonable fee when you compare it to what most websites charge you anymore for access to databases. If you go into their site and you've searched for a particular by a particular word or something, this is how the information will come up. You can actually see the little image of the letter. You can see who it was written from to who, and then it actually pulls up not only the images of the full-size letter, but you can read the notes that I've gathered, and they've included those in there as well. So it's probably the best system available at the moment to cull through all of the material that I've put together on the Civil War. And as I said, in a couple more years, they'll be adding on more and more of the letters that I've done in more recent history. So it'll be very complete. I mentioned earlier that I had spent some time with Civil War Times Magazine. They featured many of my transcriptions in their monthly exclusives. They put together an e-letter that they were putting out the last year or two, which I had a regular feature in. I also collaborated with someone named Sally McNamara Ivy. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of her. She runs a website called Sally's Diaries, and she and her partner actually do a podcast now, which is very interesting. And Sally has collected something, she claims like 10,000 diaries over her lifetime. And so she features those in not only a podcast, but on the internet. She posts transcriptions and stuff. And I've helped her with a couple of her Civil War diaries and helped her put together sort of the important information that would be useful in a podcast. Her podcast is quite popular and growing in popularity. So I'm getting some publicity there. I also want to mention a guy named Scott R. McKinley, who is a voice actor who expressed an interest in doing audio recordings of many of my Civil War letters that I've transcribed and posted on Spared and Shared. I realized that to make history interesting to people, you have to reach out in various mediums, and one medium is audio. And a lot of the young people, I think in particular, would rather listen to a recording of a letter than to sit down and read it. And so he's put together, I don't know, he's maybe done 30 or 40 audio recordings. Because he's a voice actor, he can modulate his voice in different dialects, and so it makes a very interesting presentation. And his audio recordings, of course, are on the internet as well. And I point readers to them through my Spared and Shared Facebook page periodically when he comes out with a new recording. Some people have asked me what the largest archive that I've transcribed is, and this would be, at the moment at least, it's an archive that was the letters of a guy named Don Carlos Newton. And he was a captain in Company D of the 52nd Illinois Infantry. There were some 260 letters in his collection that I worked on and published on the internet. And what made this particular interesting to me was that I live in Batavia, Illinois, and so and his home was only a couple blocks from where I live today. So I had a personal interest in this as well as historical. The most surprising diary that I did was a diary that was sent to me with the sort of posing the challenge. See if you can figure out who wrote this. There wasn't any signature in the diary, and I didn't really have any clues when I launched out on it who it might have been, who might have written it at all. And it turns out that it was the diary of a guy named Charles H. Smith in the 4th Iowa Cavalry. And he told in his diary about being taken captive in Mississippi. And I was able to find through researching it that a story about a couple of guys who were taken captive, and through that was able to learn their names, and as a result figure out who actually wrote this. And what was most surprising to me was that it turns out he lived the last days of his life in Aurora, Illinois, which is just down the river here from us in Batavia. And his grave marker, as you can see in the picture there, is in a cemetery that's not more than about 5 miles from where I live. So this was a big surprise to me. As you can imagine, doing a lot of Civil War letters, there are frequent references to Abraham Lincoln. And I always loved reading about Abraham Lincoln. And I think in particular enjoyed reading never before published anecdotes about Lincoln, and stories or observations of Lincoln that appear in these private letters. What I'm showing here are just some of the examples of some of the letters and people that interacted with Lincoln that were things from featured on some of my web pages, the letters that I've transcribed over the last 15 years. I put together quite a bit of this material for a presentation to the Lincoln Association here in Chicago a year and a half or so ago. In putting that together, I put it on a website, on my Spared and Shared website, under the title Spotlight on Lincoln, as you can see there in the lower right-hand part of your screen, an image there that I had as the banner on my website. And what I had done was culled through the 15,000 or so letters that I've transcribed to look for any references to Lincoln that I thought were interesting. After that presentation that I made, I was approached by Jonathan White, who's a professor at Christopher Newport University, where he teaches American Studies. He's authored many books. He suggested to me that this material that I had pulled together for the Lincoln Association would make a good book if we wanted to publish something together that seemed like a good idea. And so what I ended up doing was taking material that I had pulled together for that presentation and supplied it to Jonathan, and he worked with a graduate student to turn the material back into the original. Well, in what I had published was in my transcriptions to make it readable. I had corrected the spelling and the punctuation and things of that nature to make it a little more readable for many of these quotes. And what he did and felt was important to do was to put it back into the vernacular of the people that wrote it, and to footnote it heavily with citations and references and stuff. And so he took what I had pulled together from all these transcriptions that I've done and put it into a readable book format. And so together we've come out with this book that's called A Great and Good Man, a rare firsthand accounts and observations of Abraham Lincoln. What I think is unique about this book is that this pulls material from my transcriptions that is material that's never been published before. So while there are not any great revelations in terms of learning something special about Lincoln that maybe we didn't know about, it's people's own choice of words about describing him, everything from politicians to civilians and soldiers. And so I found them pretty fascinating excerpts that are included in this book. Something like 170 pages is what we have in this book. It's published by Reedy Press. It's available now. It came out for sale on October 15th. So it's available now in your bookstores. You can get it on Amazon. Great little book. Good little reading material to take with you on a trip or something like that because it's not, because it doesn't tell a story. They're just little excerpts from letters. One can go at it a little bit at a time when one has time, as I said, like on a trip or something like that to read it. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm available to answer questions about this material. I hope that you found it interesting. Thank you.